It's happened, team. The nerds have come to the Shadowlands. I'm talking to my friends out there who are performance orientated, those ones who really do care about those bits and bobs that they can do with their character to make them that little bit stronger. And as the Shadowlands is about to drop, of course, people are starting to make their plans and preparations, even with, and I know many of you are waiting for the class looks, but Blizzard is chopping and changing the classes all the time. So today I wanted to look at a couple of things that are starting to pop up as people are preparing for what's best, what's going to be strongest, what do we need in the raids, and all those kinds of things, and see how the numbers are popping up. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't stuff to get really outraged about. It's likely overlooked stuff that's as a result of more recent changes. Okay, so let's take a quick look at one of those things, shall we? Let's look here. So the Sims are starting to pop out on the racials. You remember racials? That thing that wasn't a big deal for a long time. This is what's come out of it. Why? Well, recently they decided to change the secondary stat system, didn't they? They've squashed it down to try and put heavy diminishing returns in place, which means things like food buffs are now massively more powerful. So that's kind of an interesting situation that we've ended up in here, is that pandas are suddenly just like rocketing to almost like 4 times stronger than anyone else in terms of their just passive DPS output from eating food, the little fat bastards. That's what it's all about. Now, this doesn't even include the Soulbind trait which exists in the game. I believe it is on the Venthia side, which actually also buffs your benefit that you get from food and flasks and things like that by another 15% on top. It's one of those things that needs to be resolved. We don't want this, Blizz. We don't want racials to make a comeback. On top of everything else, we really don't want racials to make a comeback. But again, it's likely just something that's been overlooked with them adjusting how the secondary stat system is going to work in the Shadowlands and them trying to stop people just going whole hog into one and also scaling exponentially. We may end up in a weird scenario for those of you who aren't aware of the system. I'll link stuff down below for you. Where we're just aiming for like X% of every stat, and it kind of makes gear a bit boring. It's likely not to happen in the first tier, but essentially all that's happening is your secondary stats will now suffer heavy diminishing returns past a certain point, around 25%. And what that means is, if you're like a heavy haste user and you get some trinket that gives you a buttload of haste, that haste might be going to waste. So you might end up in a scenario where you have a really good haste trinket and you reduce the haste on your gear elsewhere so that you get much more benefit all over the place. But that is one of the things that is happening, is right now it looks like the pandas are just like, oh, I do 8% more damage. Now, these are basic Sims, okay? Don't read too much into them. Again, not stuff to really get your panties in a twist over. The other one is I have this Wowhead article open here, and you kind of want to read about this, is the potency socket unlocks that come with the Soulbinds. Again, it's kind of nerdy stuff, but it's important. So here are your Soulbinds, right? I'm on a Bastion character right now. And my friend Pelagos here has a variety of pathways to choose. And as you can see, he has these Conduit slots, and they're marked differently. We've got Finesse with the little lightning bolt, Potency, which is going to be damage and healing, like straight throughput stuff. And then we've got Endurance, which is more defensive style stuff. And as you pick up your Conduits, you can get them from reputation vendors, you can get them from the end of dungeons, all those kinds of things. You get them from the campaigns. Some of them are world boss drops, especially the Lego recipes. Stay tuned for our video next week on the locations of some of these recipes. Most of them are okay. Some of them, though, thumbs down, especially if they're not 100% drop rate. But let's look at this for now. So what you can see here is that I have the whole tree unlocked. Now, that's not going to be the case for you guys on live. This is a beta thing, and this is why it doesn't get much coverage, is that we have very high renown. You can see it here. Now, although it's got that wonderful legendary orange to it, all this is reputation with your current faction. That's it, your current covenant. That's all it is. But what they don't want you to do in the Shadowlands is grind it out hardcore. They don't want a repeat of BFA with Champions of Azeroth, where everyone just grinded that reputation just so their eyes bled because it gave a flat item level upgrade. So this is weekly capped. Okay, you can only get 3 per reset. From what we can see right now, you can get 3 per reset. And that's from 2 weekly quests and your campaign quest for that week. So there'll be time getting it off. Now, this is all based on like current knowledge, but it's all subject to change. Again, don't lose your shit over this. It's not worth it. So, what's the issue with this? Well, your Soulbinds unlock alongside how much renown you have. So a certain amount of renown, you will get the next level. So we consider this row 1, row 2, row 3, and so on. So a certain amount of renown will grant you, like, row 3. And then a bit more renown will get you row 4. And a bit more renown will get you row 5, and so on and so forth. Now, not all Soulbinds are created equal, friends. No, they're not. And Blizzard recently has done exactly what we hoped they wouldn't do, is that because they're segregating the Covenants off, they've had to start nerfing all the stuff that's in the segregated portion of the game. And as much as some people don't care about balance, so a lot of us do understand that if one team has nukes and the other team has potato guns, it's not a very fun game. So their solution in order to maintain the segregation between these has been to crush them. So a lot of the Soulbinds aren't very impressive anymore. Really sad. I personally prefer a multitude of interesting options rather than 3 bland options, but that's the way it goes. So we have things like File of Serenity heals you for 35% additional health, but all of its healing is done over time. Defeating an enemy lowers the cooldown on your healing potion by 1 second. I mean, nothing that's really going to, like, blow your socks off, right? Let's be honest with you. Not yet implemented. Stuff like that. So that is the nature of it. That means that your Soulbinds, for the most part, have, in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, are basically just gem slot holders. That's all they are. Now, Conduits are universal, so they haven't really suffered this crushing effect like we've seen with the Covenant signature abilities. We saw Nightfey Druid was hammered this week. Spear of Bastion for the Warriors was hammered this week, and we're still a couple of months away from release, so more and more stuff is going to be hit by this. So pay attention. I expect to see more of the Covenant abilities nerfed right now. It's also the reason we're not ranking anything yet. It's too early. I know a lot of people are ranking stuff right now. We won't be. We're comfortable in not doing that. We're supported by Patreon, not YouTube, so we're okay with holding back on it. For your benefit, I don't want to give you false information. So we're in this scenario now where, as you can see, the slots unlock at different levels. So you can see with Pelagos, these potency ones, and these are kind of important. Like, it's different again from class to class. That's why I don't think anyone should lose their mind over it. And I think Blizzard will probably adjust this. Just be aware of it, and Blizzard should adjust this. But your Conduits, because they're universal and they haven't been squashed yet, are really strong. They're boring. They're boring for the most part, but they're very, very strong. So you can see there's like Throw Glaive, 8% increased damage to I-Beam. That's a big damage boost for something like I-Beam, right? Elysian Decree echoes a second sigil a second later, dealing 45% damage. So it's like I get 1.5 of my Covenant abilities just by having this Conduit in. I get a 1.5 goes with it. You get the idea? They're very strong. Are they super interesting? Not really. But they are very, very strong. And this means, for those of us who care about performance, we need to think about, do I want my potency slots? How big are they for me? For some classes, you might only get 2 good ones. If so, when do I get that 3rd potency slot? That's a big question, because the Soulbinds aren't created equal. As you can see here with Pelagos, he gets a potency slot early on, but he doesn't get the next 2 till right down the end of the tree. And as Renown is weekly capped, that means it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to get these slots. If we look over at Claire, you can see Claire gets 2 early on and then gets the 3rd one way before Pelagos gets his 2nd one. Hopefully you're starting to see the idea here. And this also differs across the Covenants. So let's take a quick look at that. I've had to do a spreadsheet. Sorry, big nerd talk today. Big nerd talk. So as you can see here, the red line is when normal and heroic opens. This is kind of based on stuff now. This can all alter. Some people will be able to get cap and get their renown before the server even resets on night 1. There's going to be all sorts of stuff to skew this up, which might actually become very important. But the first red line is when normal and heroic opens, and the second red line is when mythic opens. And the blue line here is actually when you get your 3rd Soulbind. So I was talking to you then about Pelagos and Claire. Mechanicos, you can't get Mechanicos until you finish the first big part of your campaign, right? Until you finish that campaign, you can't get Mechanicos. That means that when you do unlock him, which should be around... where's Mechanicos? He's there. Around week... If I scroll this over, I'm missing the weeks out. It's going to be like week 9 before we can even get the 3rd Soulbinds, right? You're only going to have 2 for a good month after the raids and stuff have actually opened. So you don't even get that guy until much, much later. And that's the same for the other dudes as well. Bonesmith Hermia is the 3rd Soulbind for the Necrolords, as is Crane. General Draven is the third one for the Venthyr, and he's really, really late. So as you can see here, it's not linear either. This is the other thing. So Pelagos gets like row 3, but that does not mean that you get Clayer's row 3. They need different amounts of renown. So you can actually see we put it in here. This is based on Wowhead searching, so awesome job to Wowhead. So you can see at renown, week 3, we can get up to 9 renown. I only get the 4th row in my first Soulbind, which will be Pelagos and the Bastion. But it's not until the next week when I can go up to 12 that I get the 4th row in Soulbind number 2. You get the idea? And it has a bit of a skew whiff here, where the 5th rows are kind of awkward for both. But you get the idea. So what does this lead to then? Well, it leads to, like, if you're a Necrolord, you don't get your 3rd Potencies Conduit to, like, week 8. And this really plays into how long do you expect your progress rating to last? Well, it's how long is a piece of string. Depends. If you are, say, a really solid cutting-edge guild with no interest in Mythic, you might expect your progress, typically, to be done by week 2 or 3. If you're a Mythic raiding guild who's in the real cutting edge, you'd expect less than 4 weeks for the most part, which means that after the raid launches, you're not even going to have the 3rd Soulbind tier if you're a Necrolord. However, if you were a Venthyr or in Bastion, you're going to have potentially quite a significant damage increase over your brothers who are not part of that faction. And that's where people are getting a little bit like mathy on this and say, whoa, 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 whoa. This, having all 3 Soulbinds is like an 8 or 6% damage increase for me. And I can't get that, but the other dudes can. Which is then thrown in. The obvious problems here are, well, if I'm really progress-minded, again, I'm not talking to the guys who aren't progress-minded. If your comment right now is, who cares? Some of us care. You might be of the mindset now. It's like, oh shit, if they don't change this, which I think they will, it's actually worth me, after researching this, taking maybe Bastion or Venthyr or even Nightfire a push, just so I can get those 3 really powerful conduits in, because my Covenant ability or whatever is working out to be X amount of damage, but the fact that I can get my 3rd conduit, just passive bonus damage, which is what the conduits are, is way more important, and I actually get that benefit for weeks before I could match it over here. In some cases, my Covenant ability is going to be better. I come back. And ultimately, most importantly, it doesn't matter. By week 14, everybody has everything, so we can relax. So it's really talking to the performance-minded people. But I don't think this should exist either. Like, having just weird power gaps between the same classes doing the same content is exactly what we don't want for those of us who are progress-minded, right? It's really what we don't want. My theory is Blizzard doesn't really care. And I refer back to the interview I did with Ian where he said, you know, in your mind, Mike, do you want the difference between players to be skill-based? And I'm like, well, why wouldn't we want that? Like, yeah, if we're progress-minded, yeah, I want the better player to be higher up. That makes sense to me. But Blizzard's not too into that, so they're kind of generally flexible on this. More flexible, I should say, on these kind of things. But it's a level of frustration that's not necessary. And anybody who's ever worked with me knows my biggest gripe ever when dealing with people isn't mistakes or anything like that. It's needless aggravation. Needless aggravation. I don't want players out there going, well, fuck me, man. If I want to perform at my best, for those of us who care about those things, then I need to take Bastion, and then when that progress is done, or maybe it hits... Because there is a catch-up system for Renown if you swap Covenants. That then we get to here, and I need to swap over, and then I need to regrind Renown to get what I actually want later down the line. It's like, ugh, I don't want that. And I'm pretty sure... I put faith in most people here that we wouldn't actually lose our goddamn minds if, for example, with Pelagos here, if this potency slot moved to here, right? Or this potency slot moved somewhere else in here. That's not going to ruin the game for anybody. That's not, you know what I mean? I hope. I'm sure somebody out there could come up with some reason why that would be really, really bad for some reason, whether or not the 2 endurance ones or whatever were to swap places somewhere. You know what I mean? If we just swap this for this, that's a big problem because I want my endurance. Which is a fair shout. Like, I really want my endurance conduit, Mike. So you're scooping me over for DPS? No, because this whole problem stems from we can't change our conduits for a week. It all stems from this one issue that's so absurd. So we're all trying to work within the confines. You understand? I'm not trying to shit on people who are like tanks who want to do the endurance soulbind. I'm really not. If I could change it, fine, you know, fine. It wouldn't matter, but we can't. We can't. We have this 1 week lockout that the game forces on us. You can see there. You may switch these trees at any time, but if I do this, if I reset this, and I lock my stuff in, because I'm going to go... Let's say I really needed to tank for my guild, and I only have 2 Soulbinds, so I'm going to go this way, this way, this way. And then I'm going to reset my conduits, and I'm going to say, well, I want this one... no, I want this one. I'm going full tank, so I'm going this way. Awesome. This is how we're doing it. And I put my conduits in, and then I apply it. I can't change that again for the weekly reset. You know? That's the beef. That's the beef we have, is we're trying to work within the confines of this system that Blizzard has implemented, which doesn't present us with the greatest of options. And it's a bit of a bummer. You know, ideally it would work fine, because the other side of this coin is that some of these Soulbinds are clearly designed to work with certain playstyles across a whole myriad of playstyles. Like, some of them are very obviously healer focused, some of them are very obviously tank focused, some of them are very obviously DPS focused, and they've kind of relented, because previously we didn't even have 3 potency slots in each of the Soulbinds. They've changed that now, so we do have 3. It's just the ordering that's wrong. So I'm sure it's just an adjustment that needs to be made. Or let us just swap them around whenever we feel like it. You know, we wouldn't have to deal with this issue, and we could use a singular Soulbind, whichever's best. You know, if whichever one works out our favorable side, we can just mess around with that one. We could do that too, but it's unlikely to happen. So be aware of this stuff. For those of you who are in the performance mindset, just be very, very aware that this is a thing right now. I don't think it'll be a big thing, and it's certainly not affecting everybody. It's not a game-crushing thing. It's just one of those little annoyances that we might have to deal with going into the Shadowlands. It's things like this, things like silly panda racials being really, really strong, you know, stuff like that. I'm sure this is just something that needs to be adjusted. All right? But thank you for listening. Watch out. We'll have more nerd stuff coming as the time gets closer. But with all the class changes happening right now, I'm not comfortable putting out any rankings and orders and things like that. Racial buffs, you know, you can just figure that out. That's a pretty simple thing. That's not reliant on anything else. All right, guys. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.